As you can see, that was President Prabowo Subianto meeting the current U.S. President Joe Biden as his second international visit. And after that, he will visit Peru, Brazil, and then he will end his international visit in the UK. So we would like to know what this means actually for Indonesia, for Asia, and so also globally. That's why today we are joined by Teuku Rezasyah, an international relations expert from Padjajaran University. Good morning, Pak Reza.
Good morning to you.
Thank you for being here.
I'm honored to come from Bandung.
Always glad to have you here on the program. Thank you for making the trip.
Thank you so much. So, Pak, how do you see this, right? I mean, if we see the 5 countries that President Prabowo visits, he decided to choose China as the first destination. How do you see the fact that he chooses China as the first country, and how does this reflect Indonesia's strategic interest in Asia?
This is a 16 days tour, worldwide tour, isn't it? I'm sure it has been well planned there. But if I see from the Indonesian diplomatic perspective, we see things from a concentric. First, Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is okay. We have been there for more than since ASEAN, since the establishment of ASEAN. And from there, we go to ASEAN dialogue partners.
Yes.
And in this case, we are looking at the broader region, in this case, East Asia. After East Asia, we look at the Asia-Pacific region, and from there, the rest of the world. And with regards to China, it is closer, isn't it? It is closer from Jakarta to Beijing rather than Jakarta to Washington, D.C., even though both are important in Indonesian eyes. We do not consider one of them is the primus inter pares of more important. No, but if we check the flight, it takes President Prabowo 5.3 thousand kilometers to fly to Beijing. Compared to the US, it is around 16,000 kilometers. So it is quite reasonable.
This is practical.
Yeah, for practical reasons, and also closer. And then another surprise is on the way back. Which countries to be visited after Beijing, Washington, D.C., and then Peru, and after that Brazil, and then the UK. Well, heaps of diplomatic package, heaps of planned cooperation, but in this case, we need to consider that China is at the same importance to Indonesia. China is important, Russia is important, EU is important. The USA is important. We know their global role, we know their global interests, but also there are always rooms for cooperation at the bilateral level, regional level, or international level. But anyway, I can recall that President Prabowo respected these great powers who came to his inauguration. Some of them send their top leaders, some of them send a special envoy. This is the way Pak Prabowo respond to their good responses. And also, I think Pak Prabowo remember when he was in China in April this year, that he received a special invitation from the top leader of China, Xi Jinping, to come to China. So his visit is also a kind of
reciprocation, yeah.
Yes, and also recognition, and also we have been. Prabowo himself said that we have had a centuries of relations with China. Yeah, so this is unique. It is all right for to maintain Asian values, Asian kind of friendship.
Yeah.
So it is acceptable that China is the first destination of Prabowo.
I would like to also highlight a little bit Indonesia's relationship with China, right? Because as you mentioned, President Prabowo was invited by Xi Jinping last April, and then now Pak Prabowo is making his first visit to China. China is also supporting Pak Prabowo's free meal programs, but also at the same time there's this quite sensitive issue, which is the South China Sea. Some days ago, Indonesia was still asserting its intention to protect, of course, Indonesia by pushing a little bit the ships of China out of the Natuna waters. I mean, how do you see this dynamics between Indonesia and China?
Well, firstly, we have to acknowledge China is there. China is a great power. China has great national interests. China has a global interest, and China has put itself philosophically at the center of the world. This is the Chinese way of thinking. And Chinese always think, hey, you name it, South China Sea. And I think it has, if we see things from Beijing, it has something to do with China's history, China's global outlook. Well, today, when it comes to the South China Sea, we refer to inside Indonesia, we refer to United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, 1982. And since we ratified this protocol, there is nothing to do with China. Because the issue of 9-dash line, happened only in the year 2012, when China has found itself became a great power. Of course, great power needs to prove its flexes, to flex its muscle. So it was then we began to have problems with China. So I think the last agreement signed with China on the 9th of November, it is still internationally debated, because seen from Indonesia, it has nothing to do with the 9-dash line. It has nothing to do with the hotspot. But for China, it means a soft recognition that we have problems with Southeast Asian in terms of 9-dash line and also code of conduct. And maybe seen from China, this is a sense of getting closer to formalizing the 9-dash line. So inside Indonesia, we are still discussing. So we are still waiting for the final statement issued by the President Palace. What is the meaning of this joint statement actually? Not only is it only a paper message, or it has what we call a strategic consequences for Indonesia, because what have we signed in China with China could become a reference for China to deal with our fellow ASEAN countries who have claim in the South China Sea, like Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei Darussalam. And I think if we put ourselves in the lens of the Chinese, the results coming from this kind of joint agreement with Indonesia could become an ammunition to deal with other parts of the world, let's say the countries Japan and South Korea. So in this case, we have such a joint communique between our two leaders, but the next message is the implementation. How do we do it? Because there are so many, in my opinion, as an observer, there are so many questions here. For example, when it comes to the issue of a hotspot, we do not make such hotspot. You are the one who made that hotspots, and you want us to make it from hotspots to green spots. No, there's no such hotspot. There are always green spots. So that's the issue. And the second issue is with regard to the Coast Guard, isn't it? China want that Indonesia work in tandem with China in dealing in maintaining peace, security, and then sustainability, and then the water management in that area. We have a Coast Guard, and then in this case there is a problem of change of command. Inside Indonesia, Coast Guard had to deal directly with the president through the minister, the coordinating minister for defense and security. But in China, it has different arrangement. So it could create a bureaucratic complication inside Indonesia. And also with regard to the Coast Guard, how will we operate Coast Guard? Will it based on the coordinated work or joint kind of work? And also we need to think hypothetically. Chinese Coast Guard has been harassing the Vietnamese rigs, and also has been harassing the Filipinos rigs. And what happened when, for example, today is, for example, Thursday, there is a coordination between Indonesian Coast Guard and the Chinese Coast Guard, and then a couple of hours later, the Chinese Coast Guard go to the Philippine areas or the Vietnam area. What would the world think? What was it based on Indonesian approval or what? So this is something to be
discussed by the two countries, I guess, about maritime sovereignty.
Especially inside Indonesia, we need to make sure, because when it involves Coast Guard, so many institutions there. The police is there, isn't it? The health issue, the ministry is there. What else? And then the forestry issue institution is there, and then the home affairs institution is there. Heaps.
Okay, so let's shift our conversation from China now to the United States. Marissa earlier mentioned about President Prabowo's meeting with the outgoing president for the United States, President Biden. What significance does this meeting have, if any, in regards to U.S.-Indonesia relations?
Well, our relations with the U.S. is strong, even though there are ups and downs. Yeah, there are times when USA was afraid of Indonesia in the area of Sukarno, and when they love Indonesia when the regime of Suharto came to the surface, and they love Indonesia again when we helped establish ASEAN in 1967, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and they needed us when there was a crisis in Southeast Asia, when the war in Vietnam, where the USA sent 500,000 troops, and then 50,000 or 10% of them died over there. And then they again respected Indonesia when we helped supported the foundation of Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, and they had to be they had to show neutrality when we had the disputes with the Dutch in early 1960s with regard to the with regard to the Papua issue, when the integration of Papua into Indonesia, and they wanted us to integrate East Timor in 1975. So there was always up and down, and they became so forceful following the end of the Pak Harto regime in 1998, when they pushed Indonesia to the corner through IMF, International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, and they prevented Indonesia to develop our own indigenous industries, even though they wrote it in a very soft way. Yeah. So there is always up and down, and also they embargoed defense supplies to Indonesia. So it caused problems in Indonesia when we had an earthquake. So Trump will come to power sometime in the first week of January, but still it is 2 months to go, isn't it?
Yes.
But anyway, we need to maintain cordial relations with President Joe Biden.
And we saw following that the phone call with Donald Trump in regards to, they were congratulating one to each other in regards to their recent election victories. What message is this sending in regards to the power dynamics?
This is beyond my imagination as an observer. Yeah. That 2 minutes and 50 seconds call was so beyond my imagination. Pak Prabowo called Donald Trump before he officially met Joe Biden.
Right.
And the response from Donald Trump was extraordinary. They spoke in the same language at the advanced level, and they understood each other, and they appreciated each other's achievements to become the president. And then they appreciated each other's election results, presidential election results, and also prayed that each other could manage the country well. And then, uniquely, Pak Prabowo talked about Trump, who was nearly killed, yeah. And for Trump, it was God was on his side, and indirectly he said, he also mentioned, God the Almighty wanted him to rule the country. So this is something new for me. But the end of the story was Donald Trump permitted Pak Prabowo to maintain a direct call. Yeah.
Yes. Just call me if you're in America. Come and visit. We'll have a cup of coffee, right?
This is an excellent start, actually.
That
Pak Prabowo can deal with Trump anytime. Remind me on the beauty of the relation between Pak Harto and Paul Keating. They called each other, and through that call, they can closely discuss bilateral issues, regional issues, global issues, directly, and critical issues. And it means that the decision making at the national level went smoothly, because once the top leaders agreed on something, the bureaucracy will follow.
Correct. Yeah.
So this reminds me on the past relation between our President Sukarno and the late John F. Kennedy. So close.
Oh wow!
So close, so close. I think Prabowo and Donald Trump will resemble the past relation between Kennedy and Bung Karno.
Yeah. So critics have called Prabowo's diplomacy as aggressive. I mean, aggressive can be interpreted as positive or negative, right? But do you think this reflects a shift in Indonesia's foreign policy?
I think Indonesian foreign policy remains free and active foreign policy. I mean, we are free to link with countries regardless of their political backgrounds and political ideologies and histories, as long as we maintain or we support international law, and we maintain relations based on equal basis, equal footing. Yeah. And then active is active in this case, meaning we always pursue world peace, yeah, based on the UN. But for Pak Prabowo, I think I'm beginning to hear that word, that keyword you mentioned, yeah. But I think in theory, there is a special term for this called idiosyncrasies, yeah. In this case, Prabowo today, at his age of 70-something, is a representation of his history. His history, his education, his training, his life in the military. In the first 25 years of his adult life, he was in the military, and the next 25 years he was an opposition, ordinary person. He built the political party. He was an opposition, and then he became part of the government, and then he became the #1 in the country. It helps. So I think by having a complete president, I think Pak Prabowo has a capacity to see the world from a multidisciplinary perspective and also intergenerational perspective. So we are dealing with someone who knows the world, knows Indonesia, has enough education, and also he has a capacity to use various international language, and he has received Trump himself was surprised knowing his English.
Yep.
I think this is the way he can convince the world. I think he speaks English, Dutch, German, and also French. So he can speak with the world actually, especially people at the, this is called what we call the Anglophone, Francophone. I think Indonesia itself could easily what you call represent the non-aligned countries, and also the Organization of Islamic Conference. So Prabowo could become a good bridge builder in answering global issues today. So we have a great hope for this.
All right. So let's not forget the rest of his trip with Prabowo's also President Prabowo outreach to countries like Brazil, Peru, and the UK. What sort of geopolitical or economic opportunities do you see Indonesia aiming to strengthen with these extra visits?
When Indonesia responds to this world, it shows that our position, our credibility is not merely inside Southeast Asia. Actually, I think Pak Prabowo is quite outward-looking. He begins to see that Indonesia should canvass the world, help canvassing the world. Yeah. In this case, if he goes to Peru, he understands the importance of the APEC, Asia Pacific Economic countries. Indonesia helped develop APEC. Indonesia helped establish APEC. In Indonesia, we firstly conducted APEC Summit in Bogor during Pak Harto period. And then we had another APEC Summit somewhere in Bali. So in this case, I think Pak Prabowo wanted to make sure that APEC remains on the right track. And then from there, he will depart to Brazil. Brazil, he will deal with G20. Of course, he would like to make sure that the results coming from the summit in Bali will flourish after that. And of course, he want to make sure. I think I haven't read his paper, but I believe that as a president, he wants to make sure that APEC and G20 remain on the right track. Yeah. So by doing this, he could convince the American. He will meet the American leader in these two events. Yeah. Yes. That next Indonesia will become part of BRICS. So people in America still believe that BRICS, China is there, Russia is there, India is there. They have an inclination to challenge the leadership of the West. So I think the West will not criticize Indonesia's membership inside BRICS, because BRICS is only 35 to 40% of the world GDP, while the G20 and APEC individually compose around 60 to 20%. So economically, BRICS will not become a threatening factor. But Pak Prabowo could convince the Americans that becoming part of the BRICS would be the first country to inform them to maintain on the right track. Economic development, and then technology transfer, and then investment, and then freer economic transaction. I think Pak Prabowo will do this inside.
Yeah. And last question, Pak Reza, what are the things that you find interesting or you can highlight from this trip, other than what we've discussed?
I'm sure this trip has been well planned. If we see the route, if we see the days, no moments lost.
That's right.
In this case, Pak Prabowo will convey to the world. Indonesia is there to be with the world. Indonesia is not only a country in the Southeast Asia, but Indonesia is a credible middle power. Indonesia is a credible regional power with a capacity to maintain the world peace. I think this is the message Pak Prabowo would like to convey to the world.
Yeah, and I think we talked right after the inauguration of the president in regards to how Pak Prabowo will showcase his international relations, and I believe this trip highlights exactly that. Thank you, Pak Reza, for joining us for this conversation.
I'm honored.
Been very enlightening.
I'm honored.
Always.
Thank you very much.
So once again, that was our international relations expert, all the way from Bandung, Padjajaran University, Pak Teuku Rezasyah. That was our conversation in regards to the trip. We hope to report more, obviously, in the coming days.
Oh yes, absolutely, because President Prabowo Subianto will be visiting Brazil, Peru, and also will end his trip in the UK. And we're set for another commercial break. When we return, we'll bring you the world headlines.